Hey, what's up guys? This is Bryce Van Hoosen, and today we are going to check out the in-ear monitor system that I built for the last tour that my band, Silver Talon, just went on. Alright, so as I promised everybody on Instagram, and if you're not following me on Instagram, you certainly should, because I update there a lot more than I update here. But as I promised people on Instagram, I would go over the in-ear monitor system that I built for the last tour that my band Silver Talon went on with Ex Mortis and Hatriot in July. This is a little 2-week West Coast run, and it was a really good opportunity to test out kind of the basic setup of an in-ear monitor system. So I have already made some changes kind of based on what I encountered on that tour and dealing with sort of local sound guys, portability, all of that kind of stuff. So I will talk through all of that as we look at what we got here. So this is basically it. All right, so I'm gonna move the camera down and back so we can see what we are dealing with here, but this is basically it. It fits in this 6U container, and this is a SKB iSeries flight case, I guess. So it was really important to have something that was going to fit in a package that would be easy to fly with. So if you get used to using a system like this, you kind of don't want to change and go back to wedges and things like that. And since the particular genre of music that we play is maybe a little bit more popular in Europe and sort of overseas than it is in the States, I imagine that that's something we're gonna have to deal with relatively soon here. So it had to fly. So what that means is I sort of had to split things up into a couple different groupings, but the main part of it is here. And we will kind of take a look at the other part of that and sort of why I decided to set this up and sort of split it out the way that I did. But anyway, this is the case. This is basically what we're throwing into the trailer and hauling into the venue every night. I really like to kind of mark things up and put stickers all over stuff and spray paint it with our little Silver Talon insignia here. Basically just because a lot of people buy this same sort of stuff, and I want to make sure that we're able to identify our own gear in a venue where lots of bands might be at easily. So across the venue I can see and know when something is ours, and it's also a lot harder to steal something when it has a giant spray painted silver ST with wings on the front of it, right? So this thing's really cool. It's got a little handle, it rolls, all of that sort of stuff. So had no issues at all with this over the 2 weeks that we were out. So that is great. All right, so a number of different latches here, and it opens up, and as you can see, the top, nice egg carton foam, and then these additional foam corners that basically hold the rack into place. So let's see if I can try to not completely fall all over myself here. Let me pull this thing out. All right, so here it is. This is the front. Essentially, like I said, we have a 6U rack here. Went with the tried and true Behringer X32. That is the digital mixer that we are using, and that is basically powering these receivers here. So we have 4 of the Sennheiser in-ear monitor transmitters, and basically this is sending 4 individual stereo mixes to each person that plays an instrument in the band. Luckily, our singer Wyatt doesn't really like to use in-ear monitors because singers sometimes don't like to have anything in their ears when they sing. So this is just for instruments. So me, Devin, Walter, Michael, guitar, bass, drums, we're all on in-ears. He's on the wedges. it makes everything really easy because we have our monitor mix set up once we go into the venue. We don't need to sound check anything. It's all set up, ready to go. And we basically just tell the sound guy, put all vocals in the monitors or put all vocals in the wedge monitors rather. And there we go. That's our show. All right. And then we also have this antenna combiner, the Sennheiser model as well. I had one of these older G3 systems that I have been kind of carting around for a number of years here. So I use that. They work and are completely compatible with the newer G4 IEM transmitters. So if you have an older one, don't feel bad about mixing and matching. It's completely fine. The X32 is an interesting unit. It's about 10 years old at this point. It has some weird old school quirks and things that were sort of commonplace in, say, like 2014 when it was released that are a little outdated now. So there are some things that you kind of have to deal with and expect when running an X32. But that also being said, all of the tutorials and stuff out there, I mean, there's tons of them, so it's really easy to sort of figure out how to set this up and to do what you need to do with it, because there is so much of that community kind of content out there. So you need to figure out how to set up for individual stereo mixes. There's a YouTube video for that, so that's great. But things like, you know, Wi-Fi and USB 2.0 rather than USB-C, that's kind of something you're gonna have to deal with. Because this is such a small package, there's not really room for like a drawer or any sort of utility kind of thing that you would have on a bigger, say like a 10U in your monitor rack or whatever. So I had to make use of some of the side real estate here. Luckily, with this case, we can fit a certain amount of things on the side, and I can just sort of pull this out and put it on stage as sort of one piece without necessarily having to cart a whole bunch of other stuff over. So Velcro on the side for, you know, transmitter packs and things like that is invaluable. So speaking of which, I said I would talk about Wi-Fi. And here we go. This is the gloriously chaotic side of the rack that we are running here. And what I have here is, this is basically just a wireless router that I can plug my cell phone into using this little iPhone cable and turn the hotspot on my cell phone, and then basically it sends internet to the X32 so that then my computer can talk about it, or my computer can talk to it rather, as well as this little iPhone color that I have from roughly 2014 as well, that we use to control our monitor mixes. Unfortunately, there's not like a new Android app or whatever to actually mess with the X32 monitor mix, so dudes in the band that have Androids, I gotta use the old school iPhone for them. So yeah, basically this thing transmits Wi-Fi to the X32 rack. It transmits Wi-Fi to my phone. Our drummer Michael signs in to this Wi-Fi on his phone so that he can control basically the click track from his phone, all wirelessly. That all worked beautifully. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. Because everything's USB 2.0, I ran out of ports on my MacBook Air, so we got this Belkin USB 2.0 dock. Works really well. Didn't have any issues with it dropping out or anything like that, so knock on wood. The MIDI Flex 4, since everything is on a click track, we basically don't have to worry about switching channels on our Kempers, so we're just sending MIDI signals from the computer to our Kempers, and that happens automatically. I have another video on how to set that up, so check that out. There should be a card somewhere on screen to do that. Yeah, click that. So yeah, and then zip ties and Velcro to sort of keep everything in check. All right, and then other side here, like I said, we have the receivers, plug our headphones into. Everybody can carry those independently on stage. All full stereo mixes go to these. Cell phone, in case anybody needs to mess with the mix, iPhone specifically. And this is the Entech OpenDMX to USB connection that we plug our lights into. So the lights also run on a track. And that happens. Coming back here to the back, of course you have a lot of spaghetti here, but the back of the X32, the inputs are empty, which we'll talk about that in just a second. And then I have the all of the outputs, all of the main outputs from the X32 going into the 4 Sennheiser IEM transmitters, full stereo mix, like I said. Ethernet connection, USB connection. We also use this as an audio interface, so I plug my computer into it, and then I have an out here for like our intro, interlude, and any kind of other additional kind of like keyboard stuff that's needed for live, since we don't have a keyboard player. And then of course firmament power, because you know you can't go wrong with that. That is basically that in a nutshell. Oh, and I forgot the final awesome piece, the antenna. So this is the most recent addition to this setup. So what I was doing on tour and what I had changed in coming home is, instead of having a snake splitter, which we'll talk about in a second, we were basically going and having this ART 3-way splitter split everything to front of house and then to our in-ear monitors. Well, this was a lot more complicated than I initially anticipated, because it requires a sound guy to come over and basically to plug into your box, which is somewhere on stage. So that requires about 7 additional XLR cables that he is going to have to supply and connect to his board, and sound guys are not into that. It takes time, and of course my ADHD ass is not going to explain that very well to them coming into a venue, so it's going to be kind of the 15-minute switchover time is when all of that's going to be discussed, because that's just how I am. So, but what we were doing on tour is we had that basically set up in here, and all of the guys in the band, we would plug our Kempers, our bass, all that kind of stuff into the 3-way splitter here. It would go into the X32 and then come out into our monitor mix. Front of house would also have to plug in, and then they would have to basically plug that into their board, and that's how they could get our direct signal. Well, because that proved to be a little bit complicated, after about the 3rd show, I decided that was way too much work, and we would basically just use the cabs, Ex Mortis's cabs, that were already plugged in, they were already mic'd, everything was set up, and we would just do it that way. So basically we were just kind of feeding our own stuff into here so that we can monitor ourselves, and front of house really had nothing to do with it. But I am hoping to change that, because I think that that will make things a lot better and more streamlined in the future. We also didn't have this antenna combiner, which is not the recommended way to run more than 2, I think, in-ear monitor receivers. So basically what you want to do is you want to have one of these, and then these things plug into this. This sends power to them, and then you're also combining the antenna into this so that the signals from these aren't kind of walking all over each other and vying for airspace. So we had 4 individual antennas going, and I had the Furman sitting up here with all of the wall warts sort of plugged into the back of it. It was super ugly, not very streamlined, but it actually worked. We only really had one instance in New Mexico where a dropout was so bad that we got completely off the click. But other than that, it worked perfectly. So I would say that's like 99% accuracy rate, right? But now, since we have the antenna combiner and the antenna, we are pretty much guaranteed to not have to deal with that in the future. I tested this, and I can pretty much walk around the block and still hear in my ears from this thing. So that's pretty dang cool. So that just plugs into the antenna combiner with this. It's like a 25-foot Sennheiser cable. and it just sits on a little mic stand. So yeah, that is pretty easy, pretty straightforward. It's a lot easier than you might think. There's just kind of a lot of moving parts. All right, so I had mentioned earlier that we had changed directions away from using this Art three-way splitter. It works great. We had no issues at all with it. I just think having a sound guy have to basically come up to your board, sort of read all of the labels, all of that kind of stuff, and then plug a cable into it, run it back to his board, figure out where to plug it in. That's too many steps. And especially when you're just sort of setting up before a show, it's not ideal. So I swapped that out and basically got this snake splitter. This also freed up a spot in our boards so that we could, or in our rack rather, so that we could add the antenna combiner and then also fit the power supply actually in the rack in the back. Both those just kind of sandwiched together. Made it work. So we're gonna give this a shot. This, I am sort of hoping, is going to streamline everything. I can just throw this on stage. Again, everybody plugs into this thing. It kind of sucks that I have to sort of throw this on stage, put the rack on stage, and then plug everything into the rack from this. But trying to make this as easy as possible. This all goes into the back of the X32. This does nothing, so we won't even look at that. And yeah, so I'm basically required to plug these in. Everything's color labeled as well because there's no way I'm going to be able to figure any of this stuff out while I'm on stage. It's just like, yeah, color gaffer tape is my very good friend here. All right, so everything is labeled here. We plug into here, all the instruments, Kempers, everything goes in here. We also have more channels on this. We can actually make use of the full 16 channel capability of the X32 using the splitter snake. So right now, I mean, we basically just have one drum. It's like a reporter microphone sat out by the drums. Really not ideal, but it works. So we could actually probably put a full drum mic mix here so that Michael could hear himself rather than just sort of going off of memory. But we'll figure that out as we move on. But we have that option as well. With that being said, I am basically, once we set everything up, I'm sort of just handing this stuff to front of house and saying, look, this is our show. Everything is labeled here. You have bass, stage right vocal, stage left guitar, stage left vocal, main vocal, DI, guitar stage right. It's all labeled. It's all here. All he has to do is plug this in. It's our entire show. And this thing has a 30-foot cable here, so should be able to fit basically on any stage and adapt to anything like that. The only thing that sucks is it's kind of a beast to carry around, but basically if you get sort of like a little carrying case or whatever, you can just throw that in there and you'll be good to go. So it's one extra thing that you have to carry around, but you could sort of fit it in a carry-on in a situation where you need to fly, and that works. And then here we have the computer. It sort of just fits here, opens up, everything plugs in. Run lights, X32 becomes our interface. The MIDI signals are being sent here. To actually run the tracks, again, we are using Ableton, and what we're doing to queue everything up is we also use another program called Ableset, which basically is like a MIDI controllable program that basically takes all of the sort of MIDI commands that you would use to start and stop tracks and add cues and a track list and that sort of stuff, and make it accessible via a local website. So basically meaning if everybody's on the same Wi-Fi, you can access that website. That basically just takes care of all of that stuff for you and sets it up and does it automatically. So when we're about to start the set, Michael sitting at his drum set, he signs onto my Wi-Fi, which I plug my phone into here. Everything's on the Wi-Fi. Ableton's on the Wi-Fi. He's on the Wi-Fi. He's plugged into Ableset, pulls up the track list of all the songs that we have basically queued up and ready to play. He hits play. It starts the intro music, controls the lights, and then basically we just take it away. Super simple, not a lot that we really have to think about once everything is set up and we're basically pressing play on that. All right, so there it is, guys, a full in-ear monitor system that is 100% self-contained and that you set up yourself and don't really need a sound guy to help you out with at all. You just kind of throw it on stage, plug everything in. Your mix should be ideally set at practice, so make sure you're running through that, make sure everything sounds good. And then from there, once you kind of turn everything on and you put in your actual in-ear monitors, your headphones, there you go. You're pretty much set and everything's super consistent. And it makes playing a lot easier and a lot more consistent from night to night. I feel much more confident going on stage knowing that my monitor mix is going to be exactly what I want it to be. Everything's going to sound the same as it did last night. Everything's going to sound the same as it did at practice, all of that kind of stuff. So you don't have to worry about, going to one part of the stage and not being able to hear, losing sight of the kick drum, whatever. All that kind of stuff is solved. Setting it up is a little bit time consuming, but if I can figure it out, you can certainly figure it out as well. The other thing is that if we all sort of get together and band together and kind of base this stuff off of each other's work, I think it'll make it a lot easier for traveling musicians who don't have their own sound guy to go and pull up to another town or venue or whatever and sort of be understood in kind of what we're trying to do with this sort of self-contained setup. Because a lot of sound guys, depending on sort of how old they are or what their background has been, they kind of don't get it. They don't understand what's going on. They don't understand that you're basically taking care of your whole monitor setup yourself. They think that they have to do something extra for you. Some of them don't even understand that you can go direct with a Kemper. I'm not joking. So if we can sort of band together and make this kind of as consistent as possible and make this sort of the correct way to set this up, I think we'll be doing all of each other a huge amount of favors. So definitely, if you have any questions for me about this, I am more than happy to answer them in the comments and hopefully set you on the right track. Like I said, it's not as hard as a lot of people would make it out to be. There are just a couple of moving parts that really sort of need to be put together. But once you get them together, once you do all the work at home, you hit the stage, everything's gonna go smoothly. So, all right, thanks for watching. I am Bryce Van Hoosen. Again, if you have any questions, add them into the comment section below. Please like and subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, hit the bell for notifications. I guess that's a thing people do. I have no idea. Don't hit the bell. I really don't care. All right, I'll see you next time.